Good morning. If you're not inspired by Jerry's sermon, I don't know what's going on. It's great. What a way to start. So welcome. Thanks for coming to learn about Working Genius. How many of you are familiar with Working Genius? How many of you? Well, the next question is probably how many of you have taken the Working Genius assessment? All right. I know where to start, right? This is great. All right, how many of you were in the right place? Yes, you're good. You're good. Please stay here. All right. I am Steve Lindsley. I am a Presbyterian pastor. I am a senior ministry strategist with Horizon Stewardship, and we are doing a lot with Working Genius. That's kind of the hat that I'm wearing here. Because I'm a glutton for punishment, I'm also a half-time executive presbyter for Providence Presbytery in South Carolina, right below Charlotte, where I live. And I do a couple of other little things. But today, the hat that I'm choosing to wear is with Horizons talking about the Working Genius. I found this to be an amazing tool and accessible and helpful from both an individual perspective and in working with teams. I've done almost all the assessments. Enneagram, right? I'm a 2. Hi, I'm Steve Lindsley. I'm Enneagram 2. I just want to be loved and can I help you with something. That's kind of my line. Myers-Briggs, back in the day. So Working Genius is another assessment, although it's a little bit different. It's less personality and more productivity and how we get things done in a way. So what I want to do is begin by wondering why this is not working when it was working before. Well, all right, we'll just go with that. Brainstorm really quickly. What are some of the barriers to work? When you are thinking about a team that is trying to get something done, all right, what are some of the processes or team dynamics that oftentimes can get in the way of a team getting done what it needs to get done when it comes to work? What is control? Say more. Someone, so sort of territorial stuff. Yep. Okay. So control, issues of control. Other things. So you start off with something, and then someone says it's sort of all of a sudden. Next thing you know, you're talking about this whole other thing. Yeah. It's like, what are we really trying to do to get to, and how are we getting there? And that gets sort of lost in the shuffle, is what you're saying. Yes. So a team leader that hogs it.
Hogs it or is not very organized in what they're doing, and they're slow to get the communication out.
Okay, good. Okay, so it's a team leader that, I mean, honestly, a team leader that hogs it in the sense of they don't recognize some of the shortcomings they have in utilizing other people, and they try to keep it all, and maybe not realizing, or maybe realizing, or maybe that's not the point. Could be either way. Yeah. Okay, great. Others? Burnout. Yes. Say more about that. And what I've often found, in addition to going back to the same people over and over again, and this is where Working Genius can come in handy, is getting people in the right spots of work, of doing, maybe the person that has been on the facilities committee forever and ever, maybe their gifts are geared towards something else, and they just haven't had the chance to tap into that. But they're on the facilities committee, and so that's like the mafia. They never leave because they can't, right? So, yeah, that's it. You were going to say, Ann? Yes. What exactly is our goal? When we need to get this done? How are we getting it done? And sort of different understandings of what that is. All right. Yes. Say that again. What's our North Star? What are we about? Just to start with, and then that gets muddied. Yeah, okay. All right, well, that's a whole lot of stuff. We probably could go on. Thanks for coming to the workshop, just sharing. No, we're going to move on there. That would suck. If that's all we were doing. Yeah, so lots of barriers to work, of how we get things done on teams. And this is, I don't know why this is not working. It was working earlier. So we have to advance it together. So what I want to do now is show you a video. Who better to hear from sort of the genesis of the Working Genius model and just some really foundational stuff where we get into the nitty-gritty than the founder of Working Genius. His name is Pat Lindsley. How many of you all are familiar with the table group? The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, that book. Anybody familiar with that? So this is Pat Lindsley stuff. And so he's got a really, he's an interesting guy, and he created this model. So we're going to take about 5 minutes to hear from him directly.
Pat, we're here to talk about the 6 types of Working Genius model.
Yep.
And the first question I have for you is, where did the model behind the 6 types come from?
You know, it's based on like more than 20 years of my own personal frustration, occasional mild frustration, but frustration nonetheless at work. And I never understood why. And then a number of months ago, I was sitting with one of my colleagues, and I was in a meeting, and then I had another meeting to hold some people accountable for something on a Zoom call. And then I was coming up with a new idea, and I was a little stressed out, and she was just like, "Why do you do what you do?" And I said, "I don't know, but I really want to figure it out." And within a couple hours, with her and a couple more colleagues, I came up with this model. And I wrote it on our whiteboard at work. I went home, I told my wife about it. And then that night, I actually had a Zoom meeting with one of our consultants, and I wrote it on my whiteboard just to share it with him because it was interesting to me. The next morning, he was working with the CEO, one of his clients of a company he worked with, and that guy was struggling, and so our consultant just shared the model with him. And the CEO started to cry because it just blew him away what it explained to him about his own frustration and his team. And from that day forward, we were talking about it in my office and with our family and friends and clients, and people couldn't stop talking about it. And so that's how we got here.
So what is this model really about, and why is it so important?
In essence, the model is about this. Everyone has God-given natural talents, things that they get energy from and that bring them joy, and they're naturally good at those things. And we really need to know what they are. And similarly, we all have things that we're not good at, and some that are kind of in the middle. And the reason why it's important is because if people know what their working geniuses are, they're going to be happier at work, which makes them happier at home, and they're going to be happier human beings, more fulfilled. And I think people are meant to be. Secondly, their teams are going to get a lot more done. There's going to be less friction, and people are going to really love working together, and they're going to be more successful. Third, they're going to avoid judging one another unfairly, because sometimes people struggle at work and we think they just don't care, they're lazy, or they're not trying, and really it's about their genius or their lack thereof. And finally, we're going to stop feeling guilty about ourselves for things that we're not good at, that we think we're just failures, but in fact, it's not the talents we've been given. So I think that's why it's important, and it's about us understanding who we are, what we're great at, what we're not great at, so we can make adjustments to change our lives.
What makes this model unique compared to other tools or assessments?
Well, I think the first thing is it applies to work specifically. There's all kinds of assessments about personality and preference and all those things. They're all interesting and good. This one is about how we get things done. So it really applies to the activity of work. Secondly, it's an interdependent model. So every different type of genius needs and interacts with another. So it can be applied to a team very easily because none of these geniuses stand alone. So it's interactive and interdependent. I think as a result of all that, it's also very simple. It's fast to understand and apply. And people that take this, get their results back, and talk about it with others, immediately see what they can do differently and how their teams can be better and how they individually can be better too.
Okay, there are 6 types of working genius, but how many geniuses does each person have?
Well, the vast majority of people seem to have two areas of working genius, which is their natural gifted area where they get joy and energy, okay? So they also have two areas of the 6 that we would call working competency, where they don't necessarily get joy and energy, but they can be pretty good at it, maybe even really good at it, but it's not the thing they would love to do for a long time. And then people have two areas of what we call working frustration. These are areas that steal their joy and drain them of their energy, and that they're not usually very good at all in these areas. So it usually breaks down 2, 2, and 2. And the way I like to describe those 3 areas, working genius, working competency, and working frustration, is to compare it to like a cup, like that you pour hot coffee into. You know, if you have a working genius, it's like pouring hot coffee into a tumbler and putting a lid on it. So it's going to retain its heat and its energy, and it's going to last for a long time. If you have a working competency, it's like having a coffee cup you pour it into. It's going to retain its heat for a while, but eventually it's going to dissipate. And if you leave it outside long enough, it's going to evaporate. Your area of working frustration is like a coffee cup with a hole in the bottom. You pour it in there and it drains immediately. It doesn't last at all. It gives you no joy, no energy, and no fulfillment. So 2, 2, and 2, working genius, working competency, and working frustration.
All righty. So let's dive into what this is here. And let me just see. Yep, okay, great, now it's working. All right, so the 6 types of working geniuses. This is the diagram that they created. I think it was Pat's wife that suggested the widget icon. Because widget was sort of the word that came up with, we'll go into those things, wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. But the widget icon is kind of cool because they interlock and work together. That's the whole purpose of it. Let's take a look at each of these individually. So, any kind of a work, and by the way, I should probably say that one of the things he says, and he may have said this in the video, he says every job is a 6-person job. Every job in a perfect world, to get things done, you have the 6 working genius at play. Every job is a 6-person job, he says. So let's take a look at wonder, where everything starts. So the person with the genius of wonder, that is the one that asks, they have a knack for asking the big questions. Okay? Why are we doing what we're doing? Is there a better way to do what we're doing? What is missing? Okay? They're always looking for ways to kind of, for a company or for a church or whatever, to innovate, and they're spending time in that. They're able to go to 30,000 feet and sort of look down and assess where things might be missing, where opportunities might be missed. And what they do is they value kind of reflection and conversation around that more than just jumping right into action. Okay? So that's the person with the genius of wonder. After that is the genius of invention. So this is the person that hears the wanderer asking the big questions and responds to it by generating ideas and solutions for that. Usually more than just one. All right, they love doing that. That's where they get their joy and energy from. They work on a blank slate. They don't like being bound to particular things or the 7 words that kill a church. We've only done it this way. That's not 7 words. You know, we've never done it that way before. That's 7 words. Thank you. So yes, so they love to be able to just think up things like that. They're energized by innovation rather than just doing the same old. Okay, that's the working genius of invention. Then there is the working genius of discernment. So the person with the genius of discernment has this, they just have a really good gut feel on things. And what the person with discernment does is essentially respond to the person, the inventor, their ideas of saying, that could work, or I don't know that's going to work, or if that's going to work, we got to do this, or have you thought about this? Okay? So they're good at providing feedback, evaluation, course correction on those ideas. And again, they rely on their gut instinct, and You know people that like rely on their gut and it oftentimes blows up in their face. All right, that's not this person. This person, their gut actually usually does good stuff, all right, which is great. From there, we have the genius of galvanizing. So the galvanizer is the person who gets joy and energy by kind of, once the idea has been settled on between the inventor and the discerner, all right, now it's kind of like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Then we need to think about doing this, and we need to get people to this, and this, and this. So they get their energy by momentum, aligning people, pushing towards progress. They don't like sitting still, and they're good process thinkers in that regard. That sort of implementation part is really what the galvanizer helps with. Okay? Then we get to the enabler. So the enabler is the person that really loves to provide support. Here, how can I help? To the ideas that the plan that's in place that the galvanizer has kind of laid out, offering assistance, rallying people to the cards. There's a lot of interplay between the discerner and the enabler in that regard. And what they are really, where they get their joy is this idea that has been developed and sussed through of it really becoming reality, that they get that, or on the cusp of reality, that I should say. The last working genius is tenacity. So this is the get it done person. Just give me a list, punch list, and I'm in heaven. All right? They take ownership for follow through. Their joy is taking something across the finish line. Okay? And they get energized, as it says here, by seeing tangible results and ensuring the work is done well. So from the very start of wonder, asking the big questions, all the way down to tenacity, to the bringing it across the finish line. That is how, in this model, a project or a task or something among a group gets done. Okay? Now, let's talk about, and Pat mentioned this in his video, geniuses, competencies, and frustrations. So when we're talking about geniuses, all right, this is work that energizes you and comes naturally. It brings you joy. And Pat uses this word a lot in that video and other videos and in a podcast they have, the word joy. Like this is work that brings you, it really is fulfilling to you, all right? As much as work can be, it's really fulfilling to you. It's where you thrive and contribute most effectively. An important distinction is it is not necessarily about skill. It's not that you're good at it in the sense that you enjoy doing it and so you do more of it and it comes naturally and all that. But we're not necessarily talking about something that you are skilled at. And that's important when we get to some of the frustrations. It's not necessarily that you're not skilled at it. It's not about skill level. It's about what brings you joy and fulfillment. Okay? With competencies, this is work that you can do well and that it brings you, doesn't really bring you joy, but it doesn't necessarily drag you down either. It's kind of in the middle. The important thing with competencies is it does not fuel your passion. And when we're working with teams just for individual fulfillment, but by proxy of that, team fulfillment, we want to try and get people to lean into their geniuses. We don't necessarily want to put people in a position where all they're doing is work in their competencies. Because over time, that's just not going to be fulfilling. It kind of drags you down. And then with frustration, so this is work that drains you and feels unnatural to you, and it takes extra effort and leaves you exhausted. They have a really good podcast, Working Genius podcast. If you are into podcasts, you ought to check it out. One of the podcasts they talk about is burnout. And we typically think that burnout is from too much work, right? Which very well can be and is. But another thing that they talk about in this podcast is maybe also burnout can be the wrong kind of work. If you are in your frustrations or even in your competencies for a long, long period of time, that eventually drags you down and might lead to burnout. So, and again, as he says in the video, in this model, everyone has two of each. Now, you can argue that that's too much of trying to cram a round peg in a square hole, and that people are unique creatures and complex creatures and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to necessarily argue with that. But for the sake of this presentation, and for the sake of the model, I think it is helpful because by and large, when I've worked with groups on this and we've looked at their results, the individual results, people pretty much go, yeah, that's, I mean, there may be one where I'm like, I was kind of surprised that was a competency. I thought that was a genius. But I mean, most of them, it's like, yeah, those two are definitely things that I hate doing, kind of thing. Okay? So another way to look at this model, we're just sort of parsing this through here, is the 3 stages of work. If you look down at the bottom of that slide, ideation, activation, and implementation. So just a quick thing on that. Ideation are the first 2 geniuses, wonder and invention. So this is where things happen and get moving, or ideas of solving some kind of a problem or evolving. The second one, activation, the 2 middle geniuses of discernment and galvanizing. Evaluating an idea, which is so important that you don't just launch into something and just do it, right? And then inspiring and rallying others to the cause. And then implementation, providing the support and resources to take it across the finish line. So you can look at these 6 geniuses in these 3 stages of work. Now, one of the things that Pat talks about a lot is that in most teams, one of these areas is the one that we tend to skip over the most. Does anyone want to take a guess of what that is? When he says, and they've worked with all kinds of different companies, Fortune 500 companies, all the way down to churches and staffs and stuff like that. And he says there's one stage of work that we constantly find gets skipped over. And you are correct. Yeah, you get a pastry. So, right? Think about it. We come up with ideas. How you know, you could argue how much time we spend at 30,000 feet really doing a good analysis, but we come up with ideas, and what do? We jump right in and just do it. Because a lot of times in churches, at least, and I'm speaking from almost 30 years in the parish, we're trying to make things happen, right? Because we're like, oh, if we don't do stuff, then right? And the problem with that is that if we're not sussing through the ideas that are generated and evaluating them well, then we're kind of going down a path. Yes, Sam?
So I would argue
Yep.
Presbyterian churches that we spend way too much time on the first activation. That in general, we get stuck deciding, is it practical, is it worth pursuing? We should have some imagining time or planning, or we should have, I was part of a presbytery that did a year-long discernment project, and they discerned and nothing ever happened. But they were evaluating. Maybe that's another.
But they never actually put the implementation never happened.
Evaluating. I feel like in our denomination, we love to evaluate, determine, assess.
I think that's a fair point, and it's interesting you mentioned that was this may not matter, but that was a presbytery kind of gathering. So in my EP hat, I'm quickly realizing that one of the challenges of a presbytery team of any kind working together is we are not together. We're like a church is every Sunday you're gathering with people. And so I wonder sometimes if the implementation is difficult because there's not this sort of regular connection and stuff like that. That's a valid point. And also you could certainly argue that we are not always great about taking time to go to 30,000 feet and saying, what is the lay of the land here? What is the Spirit leading us to do? So there are pitfalls everywhere. I did think it was interesting that they say when we work with groups, and again, it's businesses and religious groups they work with, that they said their experience shows that the most skipped over stage of work is activation, but you could certainly make a case for all 3. Okay? We're going to keep on going. Yep. So the altitude of geniuses, and you've already heard me kind of use language to sort of describe this, right? Wonders at 30,000 feet, but it makes sense, right? As you are kind of going through the stages of work, You're going from up top, looking down, assessing, asking questions, all the way down to the literally boots on the ground, getting it done kind of thing. So there's this great, I love to use the analogy of this in how in a perfect world this model would work in landing a plane. So imagine that there's a plane flying. Some of you will be doing this, I know I will be tomorrow. And there's 6 people on the plane that are kind of, I mean, again, this isn't, you don't have 6 pilots, but just bear with me for the model. 6 people that are responsible for flying this plane and doing like that. So the person with the genius of wonder says, hey, y'all, I think it might be time to land this plane. What do you think? I'm just sort of assessing and looking down, and it might be time to sort of land the plane. So the person with the genius of invention goes, yes, that's a great idea, and I have many ideas about where we should land it. We can land it over here, we can land it over here, or we can land it over here, or here, right? The discerner says, you know, that one you said over here, I don't think we have enough fuel to get that far, so maybe we should do, you know, one of these others or whatever. So there is this interplay, this back and forth between the invention and discernment until they come up with the idea, which is, this is where we're going to land the plane. That's when the galvanizer steps in and says, okay, if we're going to land the plane there, then we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, and so we need to get people on the plane to help with this and this. Again, it should be 2 pilots, but just bear with me, all right? So the galvanizer is like, okay, this is the plan, here's how we're going to do it. The enabler says, yes, that's a good plan, and I'm happy to help do this, and I can get some more people to do this, and so we're on track. And then the tenacity person is, someone please, just give me a manual. I am landing this freaking plane. All right? So that's an example of, you know, how this model, how you understand how it kind of works. Okay? Another way to look at this, I'll just mention this quickly in passing. You know, we're not doing the lines like this, we're doing the line like this. So they talk about how there are responsive geniuses and disruptive geniuses, disruptive not being a bad thing, all right? The responsive geniuses, they act when they are prompted, they react to opportunities, supporting ideas and initiatives. The disrupting one initiates action. They disrupt whatever they are presented. Again, disrupting in a good way. They drive change, they spark new ideas. I don't know that this is like super perfect like it's designed, but I do think it is helpful when you're working with teams, like if you're working with a galvanizer and they're a person that kind of injects themselves into a situation, and sometimes that feels like maybe a little heavy-handed, but really that is part of how they were wired, how they were created in the galvanizer. We'll talk a little bit about, actually, is it next? Yes. This, I think, is one of the most intriguing parts about this model. Reducing guilt and judgment. Guilt is speaking about how you look at yourself and how some of the things that you do you might misattribute to just areas that, you know, you are flawed. If you're not a good finisher, all right, well, I'm just lousy in that. All right, when actually, if you take the model, you find that tenacity is when you're working frustrations. It's like, oh, it's not that anything's wrong with me. I mean, I've got to work on it. I can't just say, well, I don't need to finish stuff. Yay. but it kind of helps you go easier on yourself in that regard. Okay? So it reduces some of that guilt of this is something, or if I'm not good at generating ideas and I'm just a lousy pastor because I can't think up new stuff. Well, if that's a frustration of yours, that's not the way that you're kind of wired. Judgment is how you perceive other people. Misunderstanding others' working geniuses leads to unfair judgment on them. Recognizing strengths helps put people in the right roles. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And reduces incorrect perceptions. So, at my previous church, our music director, amazing music director, really nice guy, one of like the super few professional church musicians with hardly any ego, which was so wonderful. But one of the things that he really, really struggled with was the details, and particularly when it came to giving our office staff information for the bulletin on Sunday. He was always the last one and oftentimes needed prompting, and it frustrated our office staff, rightfully so. And I was aware of a little bit of tension among a couple of our office staff and a little bit of Justin never does like that. We did not do the Working Genius. I didn't really get into this until after I left Trinity. If we had, I guarantee you that one of his working frustrations was tenacity. Exactly. And had that been part, and I'll talk a little bit about how you sort of engage this as a team after everyone takes the assessment, that could have been a really helpful, enlightening thing for him and for us. Like, okay, we're not letting him off the hook, but now we kind of understand why. And Justin, how can we help you, support you as you're trying to do the tenacity stuff that doesn't come naturally to you, okay? Another thing, our office manager, and I'll say in a minute here, one of my top genius, or one of my geniuses is invention. I love generating ideas. You give me a question, I'll give you 5 ideas, and I think they're all awesome, right? Our office manager would, and this is the language I would think in my mind, push back on my ideas, right? Any idea I had, she always had some comment, and rarely was it, that sounds great, let's do exactly that. It was, well, I don't know that that's feasible. Have you thought about this? And maybe, I don't think that's going to work, Steve. How did I interpret that? Man, Cheryl, God, she doesn't like my ideas. She drags me down. It's like that. Again, we didn't take the assessment as a team. If we did, I guarantee you one of our geniuses was discernment, because that's what a discerner does. They help the inventor out from coming up with ideas that are half thought through and are going to fail, right? So that would have helped me not judge her in that regard. So I think that's just this is one of the reasons why taking this as a team, whether it's a staff team, whether it's a session team, whatever, I think can be really, really helpful in understanding some of the dynamics that are already at play in the team there. So here is the all-in-one model. This is all of what we talked about so far. You got obviously the 6 geniuses. You got the stages of work. You got the responsive and disruptive. You've got the altitude, and you have got the quick language. So feel free to take a picture. And I imagine I'm probably going to give some of this to y'all later. Anyway, but anyway, can we move on a little bit, or do you have any pressing questions that you're like, I really need Steve to stop talking so that I can ask this question? All right. So, what I want to walk you through now is what happens if you're like, man, I got to go take this thing, and I hope you do. Go to workinggenius.com. It's like $25. Or if you're like, I want our team to do this, and there's ways to go about that too, but it all begins with you going to workinggenius.com and taking the assessment. So when you take the assessment, it takes usually 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, and like a lot of assessments, it's the thing of, you don't want to overthink, like, it's like, I don't know if it's 2 multiple choice, 3, 4. I was always terrible at multiple choice because I would overthink. You give me a blank sheet of paper, I can write a beautiful answer that will be pretty much correct. So you don't want to overthink it when you take this. It takes 10 or 15 minutes, and just kind of go with your gut. Don't think about it too much. So when you take your assessment, within pretty soon after hitting the submit button, you'll get a PDF in your inbox that says, here's your assessment, and it will go over kind of the preliminary stuff about the Working Genius we've already talked about, and then there'll be a page that shows this. So this is my assessment. All right, I'm being vulnerable here today. So my Working Geniuses are invention, as I mentioned before, and enablement, competencies that I can do but don't really bring me joy, our galvanizing and tenacity, and then working frustrations, our discernment, and wonder. I was actually a little surprised that wonder was at the bottom because I kind of pride myself, particularly with my work with Horizons and even in my previous church, of sort of stepping back and taking a look up here. And again, it's not about skill. I can do that well. And for my job, I have to in a lot of ways. But that's not where I get joy from doing. Okay? So that's kind of what yours will show. And then after that, in the document that you get, it sort of goes through each of the two in pairs and sort of dives into a little more depth, that kind of stuff. But this is what the main thing that you'll see here. So if I am leading a group, a team on the Working Genius Assessment, if I've been brought in to do that, it begins with everyone taking it individually, and I created a link that I send to a team leader, and they send it out to everybody, and everybody uses that link to take their own assessment. They get the assessment, and then they schedule a half-hour Zoom with me for a one-on-one, and we kind of look at their assessment together, look at their results, and these are kind of some of the questions that I ask them. Did it hit you or not, or somewhere in the middle, like on, just sort of talk about that. We talk about their geniuses. How do they see their geniuses at play and work? Is the work that they do, does it lean into their geniuses? I mean, are they working out of their genius mostly, or is it the opposite? Is the work that they're doing, whatever the work they're doing, is it more about their competencies or their frustrations? And then where do their frustrations show up at work? So we just have a half-hour conversation about this, just kind of diving in it together. Okay? So after that, I meet with the team, ideally in person. I come for like a 2 or 3 hour session with them one morning. We all sit around the table. Again, I do a high level, here's the Working Genius model one-on-one, which you did before. And then we look at the team map. This is where the real map, I mean, you learn a lot from the individual assessment, right? You learn a lot about yourself. It helps explain a few things. I've found that people, when I'm doing the one-on-ones, will go, oh, my wife or my husband I cannot wait to tell them about this because this explains so much about our marriage, right? So it's not just about professional work. It's about how a couple or whatever works together, okay? But when we're all there in the room together, we look at sort of the results. First of all, we look at the results of the team, just the straight up data, which is not super helpful because no one's going to be able to absorb all this. This is a group of people that I worked with that run a plumbing company in Charlotte. They called me in to do that, which is kind of neat. This is where the real magic happens, because this is the team map. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but what you're looking at, of course, is the 6 genius areas and where people land with their geniuses and their frustrations. We don't do competencies mainly because adding in a third variable just kind of, that's too much to absorb. But also, again, the point is not to rely on people working in their competencies. The ultimate goal, if possible, is to get people individually to work with their geniuses, but also as a team to look at gaps that we have. So as you're looking at this model, tell me, first of all, where this team is set. Huh? Tenacity. Man, they will get stuff done. No problem, right? That's kind of built into the culture, and it's the people there. All right, where's an area that's a bit of a gap? Wonder and invention, you've got one person with the genius of wonder, one person with the genius of invention, and as someone mentioned, you got 5 people with frustration of invention. Yeah. So they may get stuff done, but the question is, how good are they at innovating, tapping into new markets, that kind of stuff, and coming up with ideas and possibilities to explore. Okay? I did this with the executive team of Horizon Stewardship, and it was real similar to this. A bunch of get-it-dones. But like one person on the whole team who was he was the one wonderer and the one inventor. And I was like, okay, that's something I'd be attentive to, because that's putting an awful lot on Mark to kind of do that. Okay? So after we look at that team map, let me just real quickly talk about this, and this is sort of probably self-explanatory. When a team is lacking in any of these genius areas, wonder, they're too busy to notice, they're not asking the big questions, they're not innovating. Invention, they just don't innovate. They're kind of doing the same old, same old. If they're not discerned, I really think this is a great way to talk about it or express it. They are surprised by failures. A team that is low on discernment pushes through ideas, gets it through done, and they kind of, and it's like, why'd that happen? Okay? Keeping on going and galvanizing. You get up with a great idea, but no one's really motivated to move forward with it. Enablement. You might get all the people in the right spots thanks to the good galvanizing, but it kind of dies there. And then tenacity, obviously, with a team with low tenacity, you're really struggling. There was a guy, that team I mentioned before, the plumbing team. There was a guy on the team whose frustration was tenacity. I think he was like the one that had the frustration of tenacity. And what he ended up doing, because his supervisor told me later, because that was a connection. He said that he would, and this is how you can start using the language of working genius beyond just the concepts. He would tell his team at the office, he said, okay, guys, I'm going to go to my office and I'm going to do some teeing. Right? And what that meant, and in saying that, he was saying two things. He was saying, first of all, don't bother me, because this is so out of my comfort zone that I've got to super focus on this. And that's why I'm shutting the door, and that's why I'm telling you, don't bother me. The other thing, it was asking his teammates to hold him accountable. Like, if I come out of this and I don't have this stuff done, call me on it, right? So hold me accountable to it. So that's just an example about how the language of this can kind of help. And then, after I show them the team map, we have a group conversation around some of these questions, okay? And the conversation always just, as Pat mentioned in the video, people get their results and it's like, oh, gosh. And the team, it's the same thing when you see the team map. Oh, this explains a lot. What are the team's strengths? What are the weaknesses? Now that everyone's geniuses are represented visually in the map, is there a need to adjust or think roles? And that's a big question. But maybe there's a possibility to explore of shifting people around. Working genius can also be really helpful in hiring. If you're filling a position and you know your team is really lacking in discernment because the team has already done it, and you're interviewing candidates and you get down to final two, and they are like equally matched skill level, experience, exactly what you're needing, maybe you have them as part of their final process, take the working genius. One person has discernment as a genius, one as a frustration or a competency. Maybe you might use that to lean in there, fill your team out. Another big question to ask is, where is the leader? And we were talking about this before, of being sensitive where the leader is, not because the leader is the end-all, be-all, but, and I don't know that I entirely agree with this, but maybe a little bit. One of the things Pat says in the podcast about this is the leader almost counts twice, right? And so you want to make sure that if the leader has frustration or a wonder as a frustration, you want to especially make sure that you're being attentive to how that's getting accentuated among the remainder of the team. Okay? So just being, or tenacity, you can play that out. Where's the leader in that team map? Okay? Any questions? All right, so the other thing that I will do, and we're going to do here in a second, is I asked them to pick a project that they've done in the past year, and we're going to look back on it and analyze it through the Working Genius model, okay? And that is what we're going to do, except we don't work together, right? So we can't do that with a past project. But I have got 3 scenarios that I'm going to ask you guys. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I'm going to ask y'all to get into 3 groups, and one group will have 4, and the others 3. Does that sound good? And you're going to read through this scenario. It's like a long paragraph. It's not a lot. Describes the situation. One is the new worship service. Dun dun dun. The other is the capital campaign. Dun dun dun. And the third is the community outreach project. I don't know that it needs a dun dun dun, but maybe it does. You're going to read through it, and then, then you are going to, nope. Yes. You're going to go through these 3 questions. What went wrong with the project? Where'd things go off track? Just 2 heads up, they all went off track, all right? Which is, sounds familiar. What are some of the geniuses that you see at play in this? What are some of the frustrations that you see at play? And knowing what you know about the Working Genius, how might, if you were on this team, have approached things a little differently? Everybody got that? All right. So why don't we do 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And are you joining us? You're welcome to, you're welcome to jump in. And I'm going to give you one of these. You're kidding me. All right. Okay. It's fine. Yeah. Thanks, Rhonda. All right. Capital campaign. Got you guys. So take a chance to just say hi and get to know each other if you don't know them yet. Take about 5 minutes maybe to look at this together. All right, and you'll have the new worship service. The new worship service, community outreach, capital campaign, right? Capital campaign. All right, great. Take about 5 minutes or so, read through it. Don't just jump to solutions. Spend a little time up top thinking about it, dialoguing about it. Oh, I had something similar happen in a church, that's fine. And then eventually come down from the clouds and sort of tackle these 3 questions. We'll give you about 5 or 10 minutes. Y'all? Oh, hey. Okay. Let's go ahead and kind of move this forward because we are approaching the bewitching hour or the lunching hour. All right. What I'd like for you to do is I need a volunteer at each group, to read the scenario and then just to give a brief synopsis of kind of, some of these questions and the conversation that you had. All right? Who wants to go first? Somebody's going to go first. Thank you. All right, Tom.
All right, let's go. So our scenario was the capital campaign. The session of... Did I hear a couple sighs? I haven't even started reading, and we know how it's going to go. All right. The session of ABC Presbyterian Church decided it was time for a capital campaign to raise funds for a building renovation. They hired an architect who shared beautiful drawings that wowed the group and got everyone buzzing about possibilities. The excitement was contagious. A few leaders jumped right into talking about campaign timelines and how to announce it to the congregation. But no one really asked the deeper questions. Did the congregation actually want these renovations? Were the changes aligned with the church's mission? Months into the campaign, concerns began surfacing. People worried about debt, wondered why the kitchen wasn't included, or questioned if this was really the right time. The campaign eventually raised the needed money, but it was harder than it had to be, and it left behind tension and fatigue.
So just a quick synopsis of kind of where you saw geniuses at play and frustrations at play.
So it seemed like it was sort of had to do with your sort of layout you had before, right? Where we were really strong at the top part, like the wonder, the what was it? Invention? Invention. And then really strong in tenacity, and we kind of skipped those middle steps where we were discerning and galvanizing and those sorts of things.
Okay.
So.
All right. And there was also something I heard on there about what was that? What were the questions that were raised, like in the middle of that paragraph?
Oh, sure. Did the congregation actually want these
Did the congregation actually want the renovations? Mm-hmm. Right. So what yes, with the capital campaign, super important. Mm-hmm. What genius or frustration would that be if that were not attended to in the process? What would that? The discernment, even the wonder, like just asking, what is this campaign for? Kind of a thing, right? But certainly on the implementation, it got done, right? Mm-hmm. But it left. It was disruptive in the way that it kind of happened in that regard. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you so much. All right. Y'all are. I'm not letting you choose. You go next.
Okay, the new worship service, the worship team of ABC Presbyterian Church, that's a busy church, dreamed about launching a new evening worship service to reach younger families. At first, everyone was excited, and few people quickly came up with creative ideas for music, setting, and format. One person even drew up a detailed outline in a single meeting. But after that, the energy seemed to fade. No one followed up with recruiting volunteers, training musicians, or making sure the space was ready. Deadlines passed without much notice, and when the launch date came, the team scrambled at the last minute, printing bulletins that morning, rearranging chairs an hour before, and asking others to step in with no prep, ushers to step in with no prep. The service happened, but it was stressful, exhausting, and left the team wondering if it had been worth all the chaos. We see it's one of the questions we asked was like, did they assess that there was a need for this worship service, or what's their purpose behind doing it? Did they do, the big, 30,000 look? Yep. 30,000 foot look to see if that was a need within the community? Are they duplicating services that maybe already exist in their area? Is the need there? And then so really the discernment seems to be kind of lacking a little bit, and the galvanizing as well,
Seemed like there was some tenacity lacking as well,
yes.
Right? Like they were scrambling to get bulletins done and find ushers and that kind of stuff. So maybe enablement too in there a little bit of just, oh gosh, we've got to do all these things, and it's 5 minutes for the worship service or whatever. Yeah. Great. All right, thank you. All right, I will transport. All right, who wants to lead us on? Nobody was looking.
It was either Paul or.
We got a few Pauls here at this thing, I got to say. I mean, really.
The Trinity. Scenario 3, the Community Outreach Project. The Mission and Outreach Committee of ABC Presbyterian Church, same church.
Wow, this church is doing a lot of things.
Felt,
Yeah.
it's a frustrating church, felt called to partner with a nearby school. They spent months in meetings, brainstorming possibilities, tutorings, meals, after-school programs, mentoring, classroom supplies. The list kept growing, and everyone loved the dreaming. The conversations were energizing, full of passion and big visions, but the ideas just kept piling up. No one narrowed the focus, decided what was realistic, or set a first step in motion. Months later, the school principal, who had been very enthusiastic in the beginning, was growing frustrated that nothing had materialized. By the end of the school year, the partnership still hadn't launched, and the church team felt deflated that all their excitement hadn't led to action. So, the wonder and invention, and if there were, galvanizing, enabling, or tenacity people, they were frustrated as hell because they never got to discernment. So this is the point, and you can't galvanize until there's been discernment.
Right, and that's the whole widget gear thing, right? They all interplay, and you're exactly right. The key verbiage in there is the ideas kept what?
Coming.
Piling up, kept coming, exactly. So that shows that. So that's just an example about how when I'm working with a team, we analyze a past project and just sort of look at it through this lens, and then obviously the intent is that from that they can sort of learn how to do better, how to lean into their geniuses, how to work through their frustrations, that kind of thing. Thanks for playing along with that. All right, real quickly, because we got like 2 minutes here. This is going to be super quick. The working genius, and again, I apologize for the tininess. This is a screenshot, not a text. But this can be really informative in the kinds of meetings that you do. Being the brainstorming or offsite kind of session retreat or staff retreat is looking at the whole year, so you're at the 30,000 feet. Maybe once a quarter, you're having strategy meetings. What is our focus? How can we tweak? Sort of looking at the next quarter. If you're taking pictures, everybody got pictures? Okay. The weekly staff meeting. How are we doing this week? What are we moving kind of things forward based on what we talked about at our quarterly gathering? And then I know some businesses do this. I never found a good way to do it in the church, mostly because we're dealing with a good bit of part-time folks, right? Or at least my church was. But, the quick 5-minute check-in every morning, kind of, what's everyone working on today? What's going on? Of just that kind of, and there's accountability built into that. That's obviously tenacity. I mean, you can sort of see how these geniuses, and the key thing is that when you're having the quick check-in meeting, or even the weekly staff meeting, you got that one person with a genius of wonder that is so good at wondering that asks that big wonder question when you're really talking more tactile stuff of mainly saying, let's hold that, until the thing. Or the tenacity person at the annual retreat that wants to get into the super brass tacks. It's like, no, that's not, we're up here for now. So I found that can be really helpful in how you structure your meetings with your staff or your session in that regard. Okay? All right. Super quick, as I mentioned, I'm with Horizon Stewardship, and part of what they've brought me on board to do is to sort of look at how the working genius can inform not only how we work together as a team, but how we engage our churches with some of the things that we do. So the left column is kind of the typical things that we do, and then the right column is how we are trying to utilize this model in our work. I just want to give an example of how it's working with us and could work in your context of building stronger teams, cultivating generosity, which is what we're about at Horizons, clarity in leadership roles. When we're working with a church and that we're assembling a capital campaign team, not just trying to get warm bodies in there, And people who love the church, we want people who love the church, we want their bodies to be warm, but we also want whatever task we're working on, as much as we can determine, to align with their geniuses, right? Vision and execution. One of the newer things that Horizons is stepping into is strategic planning and asset stewardship. So, and that involves, in capital campaigns too, you got to have the vision. You got to have that big wonder why question answered. And so that trickled down. And then just, focusing on transformative results and the tenacity part of it, making sure we're bringing it across the finish line in a way that's beyond just meeting some kind of goal, but is also about helping to transform the church spiritually and beyond. Okay? Closing thoughts. This is a great tool. No model is perfect, but I find that it's extremely practical and reliable. I love getting to work with churches and other organizations on it, and I love getting to talk about it. And here's my stuff, if you're interested. That's a VC card. Now, there's a flyer on here about Working Genius. I've also got a card up here in Horizon stuff, if you want to grab that. But thanks for taking time. Yeah, Paul.
The book's a good place to start, besides talking to you, of course. But
I think the book is. I would take the assessment first, and the book kind of be color commentary. It's one of those rare things where it's like the book may not be the best place to start, but the book can be great supplemental. If you don't know Pat Lencioni's work, how many of y'all have read his books before? So 80% of the book is a story. Right? It's a story that he's talking about some group and it's accentuating different things, and then 20% is the actual, here's the nuts and bolts of it. So it's a very different kind of exploring. If you like a good story, yeah, get it. But I would suggest taking the assessment and poke around in that first. Yep. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate you. Yeah, absolutely.